Can't spend a lot of time this week, kids, because, if you can believe it, I'm gonna leave my house this weekend, and I'm gonna do a thing. And the thing is in music. Right? And I'll tell you all about it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. There's a groovy kind of symmetry in it, kids. That I'm going out this weekend to actually do a thing in music, a little recording session, little sesh. And that takes up my Sunday, okay? Sunday is normally reserved as my major recording/editing day. I'm losing that, so I gotta keep things a little bit tight here because longer episode means longer editing, and I'm not sure I got time for that, okay? But there's a cool symmetry happening, man, because it was a year ago that I published the 5 Things episode, and the crux of that episode was the story, the infamous story of our drive back from Texas, Sarah Smith Band having spent a month down in the Deep South doing shows. And it was the ride home, and it was me purchasing a Trump hat, and then me suffering thereafter an horrendous bout of food poisoning for the last, 15 hours of that trip. Not fun, kids. And that was quite literally the end of the road, though we didn't know it at the time. So what I find is cool about that, in retrospect, is that my last official act as a touring player was to throw up in a plastic bucket in the back of a tour van. Now, how romantic is that? So now we fast forward a year. We didn't know at the time that COVID was about to take the T-Bird away, but it did. And okay, I've done a couple of music things since then. I think I'd done maybe 2 shows. I've contributed to some kind of, for a while, people were doing these online kind of digital collaborations. So everybody would record a little part at their home and they'd stick them together and they'd turn them into a thing. For a while, we were all fighting the fight, kids, for the arts, First few months of the pandemic when we were locked down and we lost all of our shows and we lost all of our sessions and we lost all of our music, all of our livelihood, etc. But now we're going to fight for rock, kids. We're going to get together and we're going to record these things. And we'll put them out into the world just as a gesture of solidarity to keep the creativity going, to keep our partnerships going. And I contributed to a few of those. Okay, that was fun. I think I did 2 shows. I have been on 2 recording sessions in the past, 4 or 5 months, maybe a little bit longer. But I'm going to say that nothing really has happened in a year since I threw up in a plastic waste bucket in the back of a tour van, and I think the Sex Pistols would approve of that as a final gesture of a person's touring career. Not saying that's the end of my touring career, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that just a little bit down the line, but I think if it is, if that's the final thing that I do as a touring guy, throwing up in a plastic bucket in the back of a van is a pretty good sign-off, man. That's about as rock and roll as it gets, man. That's Motley Crue, you know what I'm saying? That's Van Halen before all the fun stopped, all right? So I'm going out and I'm doing a sesh. And that's cool. I'm recording some drum parts for a band. I don't like to talk about recording sessions before they happen, all right? Because there's no guarantee that what I go in to try to do tomorrow is going to work. And there's no guarantee that even if I go in and do something that works, that it'll get used. Things happen. Arrangements change. they decide they want a different sound, and I'm already in and out and gone, and they got to change it, or they do something different, or it just doesn't work, or the tune never comes out, you know? And so I don't want to talk about this great recording sesh that I'm doing tomorrow, because who knows if anything will even ever come of it, you know what I mean? And I don't like to set myself up. I don't like to pretend that I'm more or different than what I am, okay? The point is that a year afterwards, a year after COVID took the T-Bird away, I'm going in and I'm going to record a song. And that feels good, man. It feels good to be leaving my home to go do something in music. That feels like a real novelty, you know? And a few episodes back, I talked about how this could be 2020 could be the best year of your life, you know? And one of the ways in which I thought it could be the best year of your life is to draw attention to the things that you were taking for granted. And it's possible that maybe I was taking music just a little bit for granted. Maybe all of us were, whether we are musicians or not. You know, a lot of the people who, for them, music is going to shows, man, and being part of that and listening to stuff and being out in the scene. You know, that's gone too. And maybe we took all that for granted. And I don't know when the scene's coming back or if it is at all. I don't know what my place in it's gonna be, man. We are in uncharted territory at this point. But it feels freaking good to be going out and doing a little music, okay? And that's gonna require me to keep things a little bit tight here so I can cut down on my editing time, okay? Hope you're cool with that. And there ain't gonna be a spinning section today because I didn't get a chance this week to spin anything, you know? And it's not a bad idea to take a little break from that. You know, there was like a 4-week run. Spun some records, talked about them, gave you the flavor, so you can decide if you like that segment or not. You know, got some interesting feedback on it. But I take it seriously, okay? It's like I don't just throw on a record and then slap down some notes and then put it out there. It's not content for the sake of content, okay? So when I decide I'm going to spin a record, I actually listen to it several times, and I listen to it closely, and I make what I hope are relevant and articulate notes on it. And I really digest it, man, and I didn't have the time this week to put into that, okay? Because preparing for a sesh, all right? And I take that seriously too, okay? Because what you put down on the digital tape is forever, man. And it's a very unprofessional player who goes into a session without being prepared. So I've been going overboard on the preparation nearly, you know, and that's a dicey thing too, because in a lot of cases, some cases you go into a session and they've given you a demo and they have a drum part laid out, or you're in the band and you've been working this song out for a year and you just go in and you lay it down, man. Other times you get a demo with no drum parts and you have the luxury of creating drum parts. And that's fun, you know, it's nice to be part of it that way, but you also don't know if those parts are going to fly, man. So I've spent a lot of time this week kind of cobbling together a drum part for this tune I'm going to record. And I don't know if they're going to dig those drum parts or not, man. I don't even know, but it's taken a lot of time and I want to prep it. And, you know, studio work for me is still relatively a novelty. I've done quite a bit of recording in the last 5 or 6 years. But I ain't one of these cats who's every week in the studio laying down tracks for people, all right? So for me, it takes a little bit of extra prep just to feel like I'm solid. You know what I mean? Just to feel like, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to present with something here. Whether we have to change it on the fly or not, I'm doing my diligence, okay? And so I didn't get a chance to spin a record, and we're not going to spin a record today, okay? But what we are going to do is inspired by George Carlin, okay? Now, Carlin, on one of his specials, I forget which one, came out to the crowd and he described what was to come. He described his program for the evening as, quote, a series of things that are pissing me off. That's what Carlin was going to present, all right? He doesn't do transitional material. He'll be very clear about that. So here's a series of things that are pissing me off, he said, and the crowd went crazy because crowds go crazy for everything Carlin says. And then he did that. He did a whole run of material about stuff that was annoying to him. A lot of stuff was annoying to him, kids, and we're going to do something like that. But we don't do annoyances on this program. We're all positive. We try to be uplifting as we go. So what we're going to get over this relatively short episode is a series of things, period. Just a series of things, okay? It's going to be a bit slapdash, going to be a bit hodgepodge. We all like a hodgepodge, don't we? So this is a series of things, and we have to begin with what's uppermost on your minds. And that is part 2 of the grocery store Muzak game. So you'll recall on last week's episode, I gave you a list of several songs that may have ranked as number 2 on the list of my favorite grocery store Muzak tunes when I was a humble produce boy. Now we know for the record that Paul McCartney and Wings' Let 'Em In was my number 1 grocery store Muzak song, right? When that tune came on, your boy got happy, okay? Could feel that music, man. Tapping his toes, man. Swishing through those backroom doors. And I love that tune, still love that tune, and it used to make me happy. But what was number 2, kids? I gave you a list of options, okay? The options were Real Real Gone by Van Morrison, The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, that's a classic. There was another Paul McCartney tune, Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, best known by its refrain, Hands Across the Water. We all love that one, right? What a bananas song that is. Ooh, is that a clue? A bananas song for the produce guy? We had George Michael and Paul Young singing Every Time You Go Away, our ode to those customers. And we had Men at Work, Who Can It Be Now, with that earworm of a sax part, and I would try to emulate that right now, but I can't do it, man. I can't emulate sax parts, all right? Can't do it. Can sort of fake a trumpet, not going to do it now. But what was the answer? And I had people writing in from all over. I had people writing in to say it was this song or it was that song, speculating. The speculation was fun to watch, kids. It blew up online. Trending on Twitter, the grocery store Muzak game, but not one single person wrote in with the correct answer that my number 2 grocery store Muzak song when I was a humble produce boy was Real Real Gone by Van Morrison. Now I want you to imagine the cheers, the fanfare, and I want you to imagine Van getting up and walking down the aisle to the stage and maybe punching a guy in the face along the way. You know what I mean? He's Van Morrison. Love that tune, Real Real Gone by Van Morrison. That would come on and my toes would start tapping too, man. And sometimes, in an 8-hour shift, you'd get Real Real Gone and you'd get Let 'Em In. Now, how you going to top that, kids? And I dig the Van Morrison. I dig that song, man. You just skip along. Real Real Gone. It's such a catchy, driving tune, man, and it would make me happy. Music has this power to make you happy, kids. If you're not feeling good, put on some music that'll make you happy, okay? And it was Real Real Gone by Van Morrison. I'm not even sure any of those other tunes were actually on the grocery store Muzak. They might have been. That's why I threw them at you, man. Curveballs, you know what I'm saying? So I love the Real Real Gone. Now, something interesting happened because our old friend Deuce wrote in. And our old friend Deuce, who worked with me for a while on that produce team when I was a rookie, when I was green, Deuce wrote in and he said, I thought Heart of Gold by Neil Young was your favorite grocery store Muzak song. And to be fair, I'd forgotten about that one. I do love that tune. Everybody loves Heart of Gold, man. I like the Heart of Gold by Neil Young. I don't remember if it was on the Muzak or not. Now, let's be a little bit generous here, kids. We're talking 30 years ago, okay? And my memory ain't that great for 30 years ago. And a lot of that is willful. A lot of that is intentional blocking of memory. But I wouldn't have intentionally blocked Heart of Gold. And I do love that tune, and I think it probably was on the list. But it got me thinking about Neil Young, okay? And I will tell you, I own the Harvest Moon CD, Neil Young. Got it from Columbia House, kids. Now I'm dating myself again. But if you're listening to this show, chances are you know about the Columbia House, right? And chances are you never did buy all the CDs you were obligated to buy. But when I did my 10 for a pen, whatever that was, one of the ones I think I ordered was Harvest Moon by Neil Young. And it's got a couple of tunes on it that I want to highlight right now. Now, first of all, the title track, Harvest Moon, is such a wonderful tune, man. And I get to cover that tune once in a while with Ken the Zen when the three go out and play our cover sets, or when the Ken the Zen and Johnny Strange duo goes out and plays our little dog and pony show. We often do Harvest Moon, and that's just a sweet song. You know, I really enjoy that tune. It's great. But I want to point out two other ones from that record. First of all, Harvest Moon is a great album, okay? If you have not listened to Harvest Moon by Neil Young, I want you to go to wherever you can find it. Neil's pretty political, so I don't know if it's on Spotify or not, but wherever you can find Harvest Moon, the album, listen to it all the way through, man. That'd be a good spinner because that's a cool record, okay? But there are two songs on there that I want to draw your attention to, all right? One is War of Man. And War of Man, Neil Young, from the Harvest Moon CD, it's got this great little groove, man. This is a mostly acoustic-flavored Neil Young record, okay? This is not a Rockin' in the Free World kind of record, okay? I've covered Rockin' in the Free World too. What self-respecting local scene club drummer has not played Rockin' in the Free World? I have. And this album, Harvest Moon, is much more gentle than that. It's an acoustically driven tune, even though I think there's drums on everything. It's that kind of got that chill, more folk acoustic vibe. And War of Man has just got this pocket, man. And I can't really describe it beyond that, but it's just it's not a tune that you ever hear, right? Like nobody knows War of Man by Neil Young. It's a great song, you know, so go and spin that, War of Man by Neil Young. And the other one that I want to draw to your attention is the album closer, a 10-minute epic called Natural Beauty. And it's a political song too, man. It's about the environment and how human beings are destroying that thing. And this record, you know, like whatever it is, 30 years ago or something like that, it was already on the radar then, and here we are now today, you know. But it's just a really haunting, sad, melancholy tune, you know. It's so beautiful. You know, Neil Young really can write a beautiful song, man. And not everybody's into Neil Young's vocals. It's gone up and down for me too. I don't know, but there's just something really haunting about this song, Natural Beauty. So there's a couple of kind of off-the-grid Neil Young tracks to check out. War of Man and Natural Beauty from the Harvest Moon CD, okay? But Real Real Gone wins number 2 on my grocery store Muzak list, and that, for me, is cause to have another game, okay, kids? Now we're gonna play the Van Morrison game. I'm not a huge Van guy, all right? A tour Van guy, yeah. Van Morrison guy, not so much. And that's merely because of my age, probably. You know, Van Morrison's sort of really big period, it rolled into the 80s, of course, but I was in the metal in those days, man. Was listening to Y&T, not listening to too much Van Morrison, you know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of Van Morrison that I really like, and what I'm going to give you right now is a list of 6 tunes. They are the first 6 Van Morrison songs listed when you Google Van Morrison songs, all right? So I'm not being tricky here. I'm giving you the first 6 that come up, one of which is my favorite Van Morrison song. Now, here's your options. Brown Eyed Girl. You've selected Brown Eyed Girl. Why don't you just tell me the name of the... Okay, that's Seinfeld, sorry. Brown Eyed Girl. Into the Mystic. Have I Told You Lately? Someone Like You. Days Like This, and Gloria. Some big Van Morrison tunes there. That dude, that cat, has had some major freaking hits, man. Van Morrison is a legend. One of them is my favorite Van Morrison song of all time. Which one is it? Write in to me and let me know what you think, kids, okay? All right, moving along. You know, I can't do an episode without having some sort of object lesson. We talk a lot of music these days. We talk a lot of tosh. But at its heart, we still have an inspirational podcast here. Want to give you something to chew on, man, okay? Because I said that the trip back home from Texas was, in fact, the end of the road, and so it has appeared for the last year. If not the end of the road, at least a temporary block. And I don't know, man. I do not know what the future holds for me, if I'll get a chance to van tour again or not. But I made a gesture this week. You know, if there is some order in the universe, if there is some cosmic thing we can tap into, some akashic field, some collective consciousness, if we can tap our higher selves, if we can communicate with something beyond what we can see, I made a gesture to whatever that is this week when I purchased a set of Thai Pro X drum shells. Now, why does that matter? The reason it matters is that I bought these shells for a very specific reason, okay? Now, I do not need new drums. I have drums, all right. I have quite lovely drums. And I've been a little bit antsy at times about taking those lovely drums on the road, okay? Now, I know there's an argument that people say you buy instruments to play them, and that's true, and I have no issue taking, drums out to play shows. The van is something of a different animal, okay? There's much more propensity, much more likelihood of drums getting damaged, clanging around in the back of a van full of gear, and you're doing late-night loadouts, and, it's just been weighing on me that, bothers me a little bit, even though I've had no issues, all right? Now, I've taken drums on the road before, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, no big deal. Things don't get damaged, but I sometimes don't sleep too well, and maybe there's something in there for me to learn about possessions, and objects and material things. But I ain't got a drum endorsement, man, so I gotta protect that stuff, you know what I'm saying? And so it's been in the back of my mind for a while to maybe get, at some point, set of drums specifically for those 2-week kind of van tours, Ones that are good, but maybe don't cost too much, so that if they get dinged up or lost or whatever, not the end of the world, not going to keep me up at night. And I know that's a little bit paranoid sounding, and maybe it is a little bit paranoid in reality, and that's another thing for your boy to work out, okay? But this has been on my radar, but I haven't been thinking about it for a while because, hey, ain't been no touring to do anyhow, and there may not be. But that's what I'm saying. Send a message out to the universe, man, by purchasing a road kit. Saying, I'm ready for the road. I believe in the road, man. It's possible to be on the road again, and here I am, getting myself prepared, okay? Law of attraction, kids, Abraham Hicks. I'm trying to vibrate at that level by purchasing a kit that will work on the road. And I saw this drums come up, and here's where the object lesson is, okay? Now, I see drums come up all the time, all right? I follow some gear groups on Facebook. Google has figured me out, so there's stuff popping up all the time. Drum set, drum set, drum set, drum set. And I love drums, okay? Quite apart from being a player. Player is a difficult word for me to use in this circumstance, because the word player, in quotation marks, means a cat who can throw down. Like, that dude is a player, man. That dude can play. I'm not one of those. I'm a dude who plays the drums. So being a guy who plays the drums is quite separate from my love of drums themselves, right? So I like gear. I like looking at gear. I'd maybe like to work in gear on some level, So I see drum sets come up all the time. And I may look at them and say, oh, that's cool, or that's not cool, or I like that, or I don't like that. There's never any inclination to explore those drums or to purchase them, right? But this road kit thing's been on my mind. And so this week, out of nowhere, pops up this set of Thai Pro X drums. Now, I like Thai drums, okay? Used to be made in Canada. They're not so much anymore. I think they closed their Canadian operation, moved elsewhere, but there's like an affinity for Thai drums, right? And they're a very under-the-radar drum company, but they make some really cool gear. And the Pro X shells are kind of their mid-level thing. Birch, basswood, very nice, Not the super high-end maple stuff, but serviceable, functional. And I saw this kit come up for a really amazing price, man. And none of that matters. What matters is that I twigged to that, all right? I felt something intuitive. I felt something inside that said, hey, dude, notice those. And then I sat there noticing them for a couple of days. Not a huge outlay of cost, the right price for a van kit, and quality enough, can make those work just fine. And they look cool, at least from the kind of grainy pictures I was looking at. But I hummed and hawed about it, right? And I thought about it, and I'm like, it's very interesting how quickly your beliefs about yourself and your notions come into something like this. Now, I am a world-class, top-of-the-line, highest percentile overthinker, okay? I can overthink my way into and out of almost anything. So right off the bat, it's all this rationale. Comes right into my head, right? Arguments for and against, which always end in a gridlock and just leave me kind of sitting there, you know what I mean? It's like I don't need a road kit right now. I may never need a road kit again because who is going to hire you to play anyways? Like all this stuff comes in, man. This turns into a big existential thing, far, far above its price point. You know what I mean? And so I sit there going in circles, right? And I'm like, should I buy these drums? They fit the bill. They fit a bill that I may never need to fit. I may quite literally never play these drums because I might quite literally never go on the road again. I might never freaking need them. So why would I outlay money, even if it's not that much money, on something that I may never ever use? Well, yeah, dude, but you can still sell them. You can sell them if you're not going to use them. Well, that's true. And if you clean them up a bit and get some of the parts that are missing from this kit, I didn't know parts were missing, but some of the parts that are missing from this kit, you might even be able to sell it for a profit. Well, that's true. And so you go around and around and around in a circle and you make yourself really tired, kids. And you got a recording sesh this week and you need to focus on other things, And then an idea was presented to me that makes a useful object lesson out of all of this, okay? Because I twigged to this drum set when I saw it come up, all right, on the Facebook Marketplace. I see loads of drum sets come up. I barely notice. I noticed these, partly because they're ties, and I have an affinity for tie drums. Doesn't matter. Maybe that's part of the point. The point is, I noticed these drums, and I noticed them on an intuitive level, man. I twigged to them. Do you ever twig to things? Do you ever just notice things out of the wall of information that you're going through every day? After all the stuff that's just hitting you from everywhere, even if you're stuck in your house, but you're online like me, stuff's coming at you all the time. Do you ever twig to a thing and you just notice it and it kind of sits and it kind of resonates for you? That is a soul thing, man. That is an intuition thing, man. Now, I twig to those drums on an intuitive level, like those fit the bill. And then the head comes in, right? And this is one of my big problems, is that the head comes in, the thinking comes in, and overrules freaking everything, man. It's maddening. And one of the things I'm trying to do in the past year with a complete ego breakdown, and an anxiety thing, is to get out of my freaking head and begin to work from an intuitive level. The problem is, if you're me, you don't recognize what that is until the drum set pops up on the Facebook Marketplace and it twigs to you and it resonates with you and you know that there's something there just before your head comes in and crushes all that. But that is the intuition part. And then somebody said to me in discussing this conundrum, do I buy these drums? Do I not buy these drums? Somebody popped in and said, hey man, why don't you just lean into what presents itself? These drums presented themselves, okay? They came onto my radar and I noticed. I twigged to them. Why not just follow that curiosity, right? Why not adopt a curiosity about the world again? Why not recognize that your intuition twigged to this thing and just go follow it? Maybe it's not about those drums at all. Maybe it's about the person selling those drums, Maybe there's a connection going to happen there. I don't know. Maybe it's about something that I will see on the way to looking at those drums. Maybe it's got something to do with those drums 5 years down the line. But if we're twigging into this idea of a universal consciousness, of an intelligence beyond what we can see that we can tap into, somebody maybe, something maybe, is tapping you on the shoulder and saying, notice those drums and follow that thread. So it did that, man. Went to look at the drums. And what I found was kind of heartbreaking, man. Kind of a sadly neglected set of drums that were at one point in time beautiful. And somebody had them and did not take care of them, man. And it did not warm my cockles. Had cold cockles looking at those drums, kids. Because they were gouged up and scratched and dinged up. And there was dust all over them. It was sad, man, you know, and I have had a tendency as a human being to sort of transpose human emotions onto inanimate objects, and that's not necessarily a positive thing, okay? I felt bad for the drums, you know, that somebody had not taken care of these things, and now here they sit collecting dust, and they're meant to be played and used and taken care of, man, and so I'm like, I'm gonna buy the drums, because A, they're a perfect road kit. They're already banged up, man. They're already scratched. They're already gouged. None of that's going to affect the way they sound. It's just going to give them a little visual character if you're willing to look at it in that way. Kind of a glass half full kind of approach, you know? So I brought the drums to bring them home, to look after them, to make them as good as I can make them, because there's a beautiful finish on these drums, man. Like, Tide does really nice wood grain kind of finishes, right? And it's got like a dark stain, almost like just a slight purple hue on it. But you can see the wood grain happening, and you can see that underneath a lot of this neglect, there's a beautiful drum set in there, man. A beautiful, perfectly serviceable mid-level road drum kit. And I'm excited about restoring them to some use. And there's pieces missing that are mystifying to me. Like, what's the story on these drums, man? I'm a little bit curious about it. Like, what happened here? What happened to you, drums? There's a wonderful book by Tibor Fischer, a novel called The Collector, one of my favorite novels of all time. And the book is told from the perspective of like a 5,000-year-old pot. A bowl. The bowl with soul. It's like a piece of pottery made by a civilization like 5,000 years ago, but the bowl is sentient. The bowl is telling the story, okay? And it's a shapeshifter, and it can do lots of cool things. And so it falls into the possession of this woman who can connect to it, who can read its thoughts, can connect to it like a psychic kind of thing. And I find myself wishing now that I was one of those people, that I could just sort of meld into this drum set and find its memories, you know? Might make me sad, but if you're looking for a crackin' read, a really funny book and a really strange one, The Collector by Tibor Fischer is a great novel, highly recommended. Very, very funny book. Very, very intelligent writer. My favorite Tibor Fischer novel is The Thought Gang, about a couple of philosophers who become bank robbers. Very, very funny book. Very, very intelligent book. Go read Tibor Fischer, man. Under the Frog, Voyage to the End of the Room. He wrote a string of novels in like the 90s, early 2000s. And then Tibor Fischer disappeared. I don't know where that guy went. But check out his books. They're quite funny and very, very intelligent. So I bought these drums, and I don't know why exactly I was twigged to them, but I'm choosing in this circumstance to feel as though there was some kismet there, okay? I'm choosing to feel as though there's something, I don't know what. And I tell you that only to say, maybe this is an approach to the world, okay? If you find yourself stuck, if you find yourself mired in the muck, like I have been for a lot of the last year, wondering what on earth am I going to do with myself? If you're one of those people who is looking for a purpose and doesn't have one, if you're one of those people who is frustrated because you're just bumbling along in the same old boring routine, doing the same old crap, not getting anywhere and not really producing anything, my advice to you based on this story and the wisdom of somebody much smarter than me is to lean into what presents itself. Get curious about what you twig to, man. And I'm not good at that. I'm not even good at talking about it. But it's kind of cool, and it opens up a different perspective on the world. Instead of being guarded, instead of talking yourself out of things, you lean into these things and you think the thing itself might not be the thing. You know? That random invitation to go on a ski afternoon when you don't ski might not be about skiing at all. It might be about, I don't know what, a drink that you have there or a person you meet. If you begin to approach the world with this kind of curiosity and this willingness to believe in some sort of connection happening, some sort of spirituality, dude, I get that this is weird and woo-woo and new age and out there. I'm looking for a way to live, okay, man? And this is one way to live. Get some curiosity. Lean into what presents itself. You see something that you twig to, get curious about why you twig to that. And then reserve judgments, man. Reserve predictions about it. You know, just follow it. Just follow it and see where it goes. And I don't know where following these drums will go, you know? But I find that to be a much more interesting, light feeling, you know, playful way to approach the world. And so I offer that to you today. All right, kids, I'm going to run out of here real quick, but it would not be me. It would not be my style. I would not be fulfilling my responsibilities. I would be derelict in my officiousness if I didn't give you some music to think about over the next week, okay? And I did encounter some in my travels this week. Our old friend Jay wrote in with something very funny because I talked about Phoebe Bridgers last time not being an artist who's marketed to folks like me. So Jay wrote in and said, here's something that's marketed to you because I said I haven't been the target market for a new piece of popular music since the George H.W. Bush administration. So Jay wrote in and he sent me a track by this band that I guess we're going to call Wet. Capital W, capital E, capital T. Now these are a bunch of Swedish guys and maybe a couple of American guys playing distinctly 80s hard rock and roll, okay? But they're a modern band, okay? And he's like, this is marketed to you. And so I listened to this tune called Coming Home, and I laughed my head off. Not at the music. The music was cool, and I liked it. You know, it's an 80s hard rock tune. You know, Cheap Trick could have done it. Bon Jovi could have done it. One of those tunes. Nice guitar tone. I liked that. What made me laugh, though, was the lyrics, because it's called Coming Home, and I'm going to give some of them to you right now, okay? I've been around the world. I've met a million girls. Those days are gone. Forget the city lights, I'm coming home. And all those crazy nights, those days are gone. Can you forgive me for the things I've done? Baby, I'm coming home. And ain't that the cry of the 47-year-old man? I walked out of here to follow a dream, baby. And I left you high and dry. And I'm 47, and it didn't work for me. And now I'm coming home, baby. It's all over. All the girls are over. All the crazy nights are over. All the city lights are over. And ain't that your 47-year-old man? It's over, baby. Got it out of my system. I'm coming home now. Gonna put on a little bit of weight. Gonna put my feet up. And I don't know, get a job, I guess. And yeah, that's it. That is music marketed to folks like me. No suburban dystopias here, man. Just a shattered bunch of dreams and crawling back to a woman that I ran out on. That is the cry of the middle-aged rock and roller, my friends. So thank you, Jay, for sending along Wet. Now, in the category of formative music, because we talked about so much freaking formative music, man, and that has been a joy for me to do, to go back and listen to tunes like Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. And some of that stuff I've talked about so much in the past. Had another one come up this week, man. And hold on to your hats, kids. Sit down if you're standing. Chuck Mangione, Feels So Good. Do you know that one? I bet you do. I bet you do. Chuck Mangione, in the 70s in particular, is a trumpeter and flugelhorn player. A flugelhorn is like a bigger, wider trumpet. part of the bugle family. It has the same 3 valves on it. You play it the same way. It's got slightly different tone, I guess. Chuck Mangione, when I was a little kid, somebody had this tune, Feels So Good. It was the title track to one of his albums that I think went like high, like number 2 Billboard, something like that. A smooth jazz record, a jazz pop record, used to reach number 2 on the billboards, kids. You know what I'm saying? Times they are a-changin'. But this tune feels so good, it's the signature Chuck Mangione song. And I used to think that the guy's name was Chuck Joni, and man was like a nickname. Yo, man, it's Chuck Mangione. Chuck Man, what up, dude? You know what I mean? When I was a little kid. But there's something so infectious about this freaking song. And the version that everybody knows is just an instrumental, man. It's a jazz tune, and it's like 10 minutes long. But it's got such a memorable hook. Chuck Man playing it on the flugelhorn, yeah? Then it kind of goes into this funk section, it's a bit disco. It's the late 70s, man. It's like 77, something like that when this tune came out. But it's got such a ripping funk bass line happening, and it just gets into you, man. And there I am, little pumpkin head, little tiny boy, hearing Chuck Mangione Feels So Good. And just being wrapped up in it, man, I always felt those rhythms, man, always felt those vibes. And that tune came back to me this week because I always had the melody to this in my head. And I'm like, I know that's Chuck Mangione, but what is it? But this week I made an effort when I wasn't prepping for my sesh to go and actually find that tune. And I did. And it's got like millions of views. It's a popular song, kids. And I know you've heard it, so go listen to Feels So Good by Chuck Mangione. Chuck Mangione. Another one. This week, I heard for the first time the single from the forthcoming Mammoth WVH record. That's Wolfgang Van Halen, kids. As you know, Wolfie, doing a solo thing, has been working on this record for a long time. And there's, 1 or 2 singles released from it, one of which is You're to Blame. And that's the first Wolfgang tune that I've heard. I didn't even listen to whatever it was, Distance, whatever it is you wrote for his dad. I haven't even heard that one. But Wolfie was a guest on the Bill Burr podcast this week. Bill Burr very, very rarely does guests, but somehow or other, Wolfie wound up on the Bill show. And that was cool to listen to, man. I haven't really considered how hard it must be to be Wolfgang Van Halen. Like what kind of pressure is on you, kid? Like Wayne Gretzky's kids. How much pressure is on you guys to be really great at hockey? How much pressure is on Wolfgang Van Halen to be really great at everything musical? Which it turns out he is, kids. All right, you listen to this music. It's straight up rock and roll. Definitely does not sound like Van Halen. For my money, sounds a bit like Soundgarden, actually. It's got that kind of 90s feel, deep groove. Wolfgang Van Halen played all the instruments on this thing, all of them, and he's a ripping lead guitar player. Holy cow. Even though he said on the Bill Burr show that he didn't, Eddie Van Halen was not a good teacher. Said Eddie Van Halen was a terrible teacher, and that's an interesting thing because, when you are a certain level of genius, how do you impart what you're doing to another person? And because nobody can hear like you can. Nobody can execute like you can. It's the reason why people like Wayne Gretzky, sometimes find it difficult to be coaches. Because, Gretzky can say, I would be in this position prepared to do this thing on the ice. But nobody else would think of that. And that's what makes Gretzky Gretzky. And what makes Eddie Van Halen is probably pretty difficult to impart. And it can be tough to teach your own family, kids, because with your family, you are allowed to be a prick. That's why spouses can't teach each other golf, okay? You're allowed to yell at each other. That's not good. That's not good for the teacher-student relationship, okay? Remember that. If your spouse wants to learn golf, send them to somebody else who has to be civil, okay? Otherwise, stuff gets crazy. But it was cool listening to this little interview with Wolfgang Van Halen, who sounds like a super sweet kid. He's probably not a kid. He's like sounds like a super sweet guy. Takes it all in stride and had the courage to go out there and be a Van Halen. You know, not just a member of the Van Halen band, for which he took a lot of crap, man, from diehard Van Halen people and Michael Anthony people, and he found himself wrapped up in all the politics of Van Halen. Dude, I'm just playing bass on a gig, you know? And, you know, but he put himself out there to be a Van Halen in the music industry, quite apart from the band Van Halen. And these tunes he's dropping are cool, man, and they are guitar rock. They are rock and roll, and Lord knows we need all the rock and roll we can get, man. So go check out Wolfgang Van Halen on Bill Burr's podcast, and then go listen to the tune You're to Blame, which is, I think, the most recent one he dropped. His album's coming out in June, and maybe we'll spin that one, kids. I'm going to direct you to the YouTube. I've talked on this show before about the thrash metal band Believer, and in my travels recently, I found a rare live set from them that's recent. Believer hasn't really toured since the early 90s when their job was to be Believer. Since then, the leader of the band, Kurt Bachman, has gotten like a PhD in genetics and he's a cancer researcher. And sometimes on the weekend, he goes out and is a ripping thrash metal guitar player and singer. That's an interesting life. That's an interesting cat to have in the lab beside you. Hey, did you hear my band is playing this weekend? Oh, that's cool, Kurt. I'll come out and watch. And you're thinking it's like a rock and roll cover band. And then Kurt Bachman comes out and shreds your face off vocally and guitarically. You know what I mean? But if you're into the thrash metal, go and check out this video on YouTube of Believer. It's live at St. Vitus 2018. Some sort of a festival thing, a benefit thing. They do not play a lot of shows, but they were, you know, kicking around playing a bit here and there. 2018, and wow. Dude, if you are into fast, technical, heavy, riffing, groovy thrash, Believer is such a great band, such an underrated band, such a flew under the radar band. And it's partly because they were part of the Christian music scene, and partly because, you know, this kind of thrash, this kind of almost death thrash was a subgenre, man. It was not something that was super mainstream at all, and they were in it, but they're a great band. And it's fun to watch them play at, like, in their 50s now, and just shredding. The drummer, Joey Daub, is one of my favorite drummers of all time. He plays stuff that, to me, I cannot figure it out. This stuff is super progressive, super technical. It's weird. It's heavy. And what I find interesting about it is because the last two Believer records that came out long after the band broke up, and they reappeared 20 years later and started knocking out records again, and they became less of a technical thrash band and more of a progressive metal band. And that's cool. But what they played on this show was all the thrashy stuff. So it goes all the way back to like 1989, their first record, Extraction from Mortality. And it's so fun to watch and hear them play this music. And Kurt Bachman even says at one point, a warning to you 20-year-olds right now who are, you know, starting a band and thinking about that. Whatever you do, remember that in 30 years, you might have to do it again. So they're like laboring over trying to get through these tunes, man, but they just crush them. And as a live performance, freaking really stunning. It was so much fun to watch this. If you're one of my, you know, church friends from back in the day, you were into Believer, go check that out. It's so much fun. If you're just a metal person, if you're into technical thrash, go check out that Believer thing on the YouTube. Great band. Cannot recommend them highly enough. And yeah, maybe one day we'll talk to Kurt Bachman. I'm not sure. We'll see, kids. We'll see. Who knows what the future holds? One last little note for you before I get on here. I was supposed to keep this really short, and it wound up being the usual hour anyhow. The John Huff podcast referenced on the pod playlist on Spotify was not properly made public, so it was maybe a little bit difficult to find unless you went right to my profile. It is public now. JH Pod referenced on the pod playlist, and what you'll find on there makes me smile, okay? Now, it's the music we've talked about on this show over the past 5 or 6 months, all right? Edison Lighthouse, Archers of Loaf, Sarah Harmer, Paul McCartney, Gregory Alan Isakov, AC/DC, Y&T, Sugar Rose, Bon Iver, Wings, Buckner and Garcia with Bagman Fever. The War on Drugs, The New Pornographers, Robin McCauley, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Van Halen, Stryper, Kathleen Edwards, Galactic Cowboys, Dirty Look, Dirty Looks, Petra, Black Swan, Love, Hate, Olivia Newton-John, Saint, Stone Temple Pilots, King's X, Urge, Overkill, Maria McKee, Foo Fighters, Phoebe Bridgers. I'll put on there some Mammoth. That was Van Halen's name before they were Van Halen, was Mammoth, right? So it's a throwback from Wolfgang to his dad's old band. Interesting choice to make, very sentimental. Put some Chuck Mangione on there. We'll put some Wolfie on there. Whatever else I talked about on this episode that I can't remember, maybe some Neil Young, man. And I love the variety on that playlist, you know, where you get Saint and Maria McKee on the same playlist. And I like that. You know, I talked about Phoebe Bridgers' lyrics being full of references and being somewhat, you know, a stream of consciousness and a little bit arcane. I love that stuff, man. And I love that when I look at this list, I see all over the place. I think that's pretty cool. I think that is a selling point of this podcast. I have a list here of some of the topics we've talked about in the past 5 months. And if you look at that, you'd say, this guy is podcasting wrong. We have Dirty Looks and the Domino Theory as part of the same podcast. It doesn't make sense, man. It doesn't add up. And I don't care about that because I like it, okay? So go listen to this music. Think about leaning into what presents itself to you. Enjoy yourself. If my little sesh goes well, I'll talk about it sometime. Take care of yourselves. Hope you're doing okay. Things are beginning to open up and I can actually leave my house and do a thing. Happy days are here again, maybe. Or at least perhaps on the horizon. Until then, take care of yourselves, kids, and I'll check you later. Thank you once again, gentle listener, for taking in today's show. If you want to know more about the program, go to www.john-huff.com. That's JOHN-HUFF.com and click on podcast. You can also find the show on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. If you're an Instagram person, you can find me at JW_Huff. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me at JWSHuff. No matter where you listen to the show, please do me a big, big favor and leave a rating and review. Preferably a positive one. That's all the time we have for today, but I'll be back very soon. Until then, keep your wits about you and remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. Bye for now. Real gone, ba ba ba. Whoo!